I remember the exact moment my stepdaughter told me, in that cold, sharp tone, "Do not come to my wedding." My chest tightened, a mix of disbelief and rage consuming me. After everything I had done for her, everything I had given, this was how she repaid me. At that moment, I made a decision. I would not just stay away, I would make sure she felt the consequences of her cruelty. By the time this was over, she would understand what it truly means to cross someone who has already given you everything, and she would never forget. My name is Daniel. I am 42 years old, and for most of my life, I have believed in doing the right thing, even when it is not appreciated. I live in a quiet suburban town with my wife Claire and my stepdaughter Jessica. Claire and I have been married for 8 years, and from the moment I became a part of Jessica's life, I treated her like she was my own child. I helped pay for her college, I supported her hobbies, I celebrated every achievement, big or small. I thought she understood my efforts. I thought she felt some gratitude. I was wrong. Jessica is 25, strikingly confident, and unapologetically self-absorbed. She has always had a streak of arrogance, a way of dismissing me in front of friends and family, laughing at the things I value, the things I hold dear. At first, I tried to excuse it as youthful rebellion, a phase that would fade with time. But as the years went by, the cracks in our relationship widened. I began to notice the coldness in her smiles, the subtle sarcasm in her words, the way she would avoid acknowledging any gesture of kindness from me. It stung more than I expected. The moment that shattered my illusions came a month ago. Jessica called me while I was at work. I could hear the glee in her voice as she said, "Do not come to my wedding." Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. I paused the call, staring at my phone, my heart racing, disbelief rooting me to the spot. How could she say that to me? After everything I had done for her, she was telling me I was not welcome at a day I had dreamed of being part of. My stomach twisted with a mixture of anger, hurt, and an unfamiliar sense of clarity. Something inside me shifted. I spent the rest of that day in a daze, replaying the conversation over and over. Her tone had been deliberate, every syllable designed to wound. My mind wandered through all the memories, the late nights helping her with homework, the times I stayed up worrying when she was sick, the holidays I spent making sure she felt special, all of it dismissed with a smirk and a cold word. I felt powerless, humiliated in the privacy of my own home, and yet something inside me sparked. Claire noticed my silence that evening. She asked if I was okay, but I could not bring myself to speak. I wandered through the house, the dim light of the living room casting long shadows. I imagined Jessica in her wedding dress, laughing with friends, thinking she had one. Little did she know that her arrogance was planting the seeds of her own downfall. I began to notice patterns in her behavior that I had overlooked before. The way she micromanaged every detail of the wedding, the subtle insults masked as jokes, the way she relished making me feel small. Each observation fueled a growing determination. I realized that this was more than just a wedding or a petty slight. It was a challenge, an open invitation to prove that disrespect carries consequences. By that night, my mind was racing. I imagined walking into the wedding hall, seeing her shocked expression, watching as carefully laid plans unraveled around her. My body tensed at the thought, a strange mixture of anticipation and satisfaction coursing through me. The storm of betrayal and injustice had finally found a target. Every memory of being underestimated, every moment I had swallowed my pride for the sake of harmony, became fuel for what I now understood had to happen. I knew I could not react in anger alone. I needed precision. I needed strategy. And I knew, deep down, that the satisfaction would be unlike anything I had ever felt. By the time I went to bed that night, a plan had begun to take shape in my mind. A plan that would not only teach Jessica a lesson, but would ensure she would never underestimate me again. Sleep was difficult. My thoughts raced, spinning through every scenario, every possible outcome. I could feel the tension in my chest, the tightness in my hands, but also a strange clarity. What had begun as pain was transforming into purpose, and nothing would stop me from seeing it through. If you have ever been hurt by someone you loved or betrayed by family, hit that like button and subscribe now. This story will take you through every twist, every moment of tension, and the most satisfying form of justice you can imagine. Stick around, because what happens next is beyond what anyone expected. After that call, the days leading up to the wedding became a battlefield. I had to navigate carefully. Jessica's behavior grew bolder, more deliberate. She would make comments within earshot, half smiles, curling her lips as she mocked my interests, my appearance, the way I carried myself. She spoke as if I were invisible, as if everything I had done for her meant nothing. Each remark felt like a knife sliding slowly into my chest. She began sending passive-aggressive messages about the wedding. "Hope you enjoy your quiet night alone," one read, dripping with malice. I could almost hear the smirk behind the words. I resisted the urge to reply. I knew that responding in anger would give her exactly what she wanted, a reaction, proof that she had succeeded in diminishing me. I clenched my fists instead and let the fire build quietly inside. Her fiancé Lucas seemed unaware of the tension. He called me one evening, cheerful and oblivious, asking for advice on the seating arrangements. I could hear Jessica giggling in the background, her voice sharp and triumphant. It was clear she enjoyed manipulating the narrative, painting me as the outsider, the villain, in front of everyone. Every interaction left me more frustrated, more determined. One afternoon, I arrived at the venue to help with some last-minute checks. Jessica was directing the staff with a cold efficiency, correcting every minor detail, her words clipped and commanding. I offered a suggestion about the flower arrangements, something small but thoughtful, and she dismissed it with a wave of her hand, as though I were an irrelevant ghost. The humiliation burned hot in my veins. I forced a polite smile and stepped back, but my mind was already racing, imagining how everything could be turned around. Her arrogance was contagious. Guests began commenting on her perfectionism, praising her for the flawless wedding planning, completely unaware of the subtle cruelty she had woven into every interaction. I realized that no one would notice the injustice but me. It was my battle, my burden, and my chance for something more. I began to watch closely, noting patterns, weaknesses, the exact points where her control could be disrupted without anyone suspecting. Each night, I replayed the events, every dismissal, every joke at my expense, and it fueled a growing need to act. The tension in the air was palpable. I could feel it in the way the walls seemed to close in around me, the way my stomach twisted whenever her name appeared on my phone. I imagined the perfect scenario, a wedding that looked perfect from the outside but crumbling from within, a lesson taught without words, a humiliation she would never forget. By midweek, the strain was almost unbearable. I caught snippets of her conversations with friends, her laughter echoing through the house, punctuated with sly remarks about how irrelevant I was. My chest tightened with every word, but the tightening was no longer panic or sadness, it was focus. I could feel a strange clarity settling over me, like a storm aligning into a precise trajectory. I began to plan small, deliberate disruptions in my mind, testing possibilities. What if the caterer ran late? What if the floral arrangements never arrived on time? What if subtle miscommunications left her scrambling in front of her guests? Each scenario played out like a miniature film, and with each one, my pulse quickened. By the end of the week, frustration had transformed into strategy. I was no longer merely a victim of her arrogance. I was preparing to turn every insult, every slight, into a carefully orchestrated reckoning. The day before the wedding, she came home brimming with excitement, oblivious to the storm building quietly beneath my calm exterior. Every laugh, every boast, was a reminder of how blind she was to the consequences of her own actions. I listened, I nodded, I smiled politely, and I waited. By the time the sun set, I could feel the moment of reckoning approaching like a wave about to crash. She had built her world on arrogance and exclusion, and she had no idea that her perfect little illusion was about to collapse. The night before the wedding, I could feel every ounce of patience I had left slipping through my fingers. The weight of months, years even, of being dismissed and belittled pressed down on me. Jessica S. words replayed in my mind like a relentless echo. "Do not come to my wedding." Her tone had been deliberate, sharp, and cruel, and I could not shake the sting. I had tried to stay calm, to hide my frustration, but now the calm had fractured, leaving raw, burning clarity in its place. I sat at my desk, staring at the neat lines of invitations, seating charts and contracts that I had helped manage for her without recognition. Every detail reminded me of the countless hours I had invested in her life, and how icily she dismissed them as if they meant nothing. My hands gripped the edge of the desk so tightly my knuckles turned white. I realized I was at a crossroads. I could continue to be the silent victim, or I could act. I could no longer let her disrespect go unchecked. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces of a plan formed in my mind. It began small, almost invisible, yet precise. I could delay the caterers, reroute the deliveries, manipulate the schedules without raising suspicion. Each step could be subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, yet every domino would fall exactly as intended. The idea of executing this plan filled me with a mixture of adrenaline and grim satisfaction. I paced the room, imagining the chaos I could create. I pictured Jessica stepping into the wedding hall, expecting perfection, and instead finding disarray. Guests looking around, whispers spreading, the illusion of control evaporating in minutes. I could almost hear her gasp, the sharp intake of breath that comes when someone realizes they are no longer in charge. The thought made my pulse quicken. I had endured enough humiliation. Now it was her turn to face the consequences of her arrogance. I recalled every slight, every smirk, every subtle mockery, and each memory fueled the strategy forming in my mind. Nothing would be accidental. Everything would be calculated. The flowers arriving late, the music delayed, the carefully rehearsed moments derailed. I could almost see the panic creeping into her eyes as the perfect image she had worked so hard to create unraveled. I smiled quietly to myself, feeling a calm focus settle over the storm of anger. Sleep was impossible that night. Every creak in the house sounded louder than usual. Every shadow seemed to hint at opportunity. I reviewed every contact, every detail I could influence, noting the vulnerabilities I could exploit. I made mental notes: caterers, florists, the venue staff, the timing of announcements. Every step had to be precise, untraceable, and unforgettable. The plan was not just about revenge. It was about asserting control over the narrative she had tried to manipulate. By midnight, I had finalized the sequence. I could feel a quiet satisfaction as I imagined the moment it all came together. She would be humiliated without a word from me, her arrogance dismantled by the circumstances she had no control over. My mind was a machine, each thought sharpening the edges of what was about to unfold. I took a deep breath and looked out the window at the quiet suburban street, the soft glow of lampposts reflecting off the wet pavement from an earlier rain. The night felt heavy, charged with anticipation. I knew that tomorrow would not just be another day. It would be the moment where everything shifted. I could feel the tension in my chest, a tight coil of anticipation and purpose. This was no longer about hurt feelings. It was about justice, balance, and making sure she would never underestimate me again. As I finally lay down, exhaustion pulling at me, I could still feel the plan unfolding in my mind like a film I had directed from start to finish. Every insult, every slight, every moment of disregard had led to this point. I had crossed the line from frustration to decisive action, and there was no turning back. The storm had formed. The pieces were in place. Tomorrow, Jessica would learn a lesson she would never forget. The morning of the wedding arrived with a strange stillness, the kind that feels like the world is holding its breath. I woke before the alarm, my heart already racing, my mind sharp and focused. There was no hesitation left in me, only purpose. I showered slowly, letting the hot water steady my nerves, watching steam curl around the mirror like smoke before a fire. This was the moment everything I had planned would begin to move. I started with the venue. My voice was calm when I called, steady and professional, as if I were handling a routine detail. I confirmed the schedule, then subtly shifted it, framing it as a request from the bride to adjust arrival times due to unexpected delays. The woman on the other end agreed without suspicion. I thanked her and hung up, feeling the first click of the first domino falling. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with control. Next came the caterers. I referenced a small change in delivery timing, something that sounded reasonable, almost responsible. I could hear the clatter of dishes in the background as the coordinator assured me it would be handled. I imagined the food arriving just late enough to create confusion, not disaster, but disruption. The kind that spreads unease like a slow ripple across a still pond. Then the florist. I adjusted the drop-off window again, just slightly. My tone remained polite, cooperative, even apologetic. I was careful with every word. I wanted no suspicion, only compliance. Each call ended with a thank you. Each thank you felt like a quiet promise that something extraordinary was about to happen. By the time I put my phone down, my hands were steady, but my chest felt tight with anticipation. The plan was no longer an idea. It was in motion. I could almost see the timeline shifting, bending under the weight of small, invisible changes. I arrived near the venue early, parking across the street where I could watch without being seen. The sky was pale and overcast, the air cool and sharp against my skin. I rolled my window down slightly and listened to the distant sounds of delivery trucks and hurried footsteps. The atmosphere was thick with expectation, and I was standing at the center of it without anyone knowing. The first sign came when the staff began to pace more quickly than before. Clipboards flipped, phones lifted, voices lowered into urgent whispers. It was subtle, but it was there, a flicker of uncertainty. My heartbeat drummed in my ears. Then the florist truck arrived later than expected. I saw the driver speaking with the coordinator, her hands gesturing in short, irritated motions. I leaned back in my seat, breathing slowly, letting the moment stretch. This was the second domino. Moments later, another staff member hurried across the entrance, phone pressed tightly to her ear. Her shoulders were tense. Her steps were rushed. I could feel the shift in energy even from where I sat. I imagined Jessica at home, still confident, still convinced everything was unfolding perfectly. That image alone sent a calm satisfaction through me. She had no idea that her flawless plan was already unraveling thread by thread. When the catering van finally arrived, I watched them unload with urgency, their movements hurried, their faces tight. They were behind schedule, and behind schedule is where panic begins. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sound of slamming doors and raised voices sink in. It was not chaos yet, but it was close enough to taste. I stepped out of my car and walked closer, staying on the edge of the scene. I did not speak to anyone. I did not need to. The tension was doing the work for me. I could hear fragments of conversation. That is not what we were told. We need confirmation. We are already late. Each sentence was a stitch in the unraveling fabric of her perfect day. My skin tingled, a mixture of adrenaline and calm. I was not angry anymore. I was precise. Every movement around me confirmed that my plan was working, not violently, not loudly, just efficiently. I imagined her walking into this atmosphere, sensing something was wrong, but not understanding why. I imagined her tightening grip on control slipping through her fingers. That image stayed with me as I stepped back, returning to my car. I sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, watching the quiet storm grow. This was no longer about revenge alone. This was about balance, about showing her that power does not belong only to those who shout the loudest or belittle the quietest. And the most powerful part was this: she still thought she was in charge. By the time Jessica arrived at the venue, the atmosphere had already shifted. The guests were milling about, murmuring quietly, confusion spreading like wildfire. The perfectly orchestrated wedding she had imagined in her mind no longer existed. I watched from a distance, leaning against the side of my car, heart steady but full of anticipation. Every step she took, every smile she forced, was met with a subtle undercurrent of tension she could not control. Her eyes widened the moment she saw the decorations partially missing. The centerpieces delayed, the band nowhere in sight. She froze for a heartbeat, a flash of panic crossing her face. The smirk she had worn for months was gone, replaced with the faint tremor of disbelief. I felt a surge of satisfaction, not malicious, but deserved. Every slight she had thrown at me, every dismissive glance, had built to this moment. The caterers rushed past her, trays clattering, their voices rising in stress. The coordinator whispered urgently into her phone, trying to manage the chaos. Guests exchanged puzzled glances, asking questions, pointing discreetly at missing elements, at people who were supposed to be there. The illusion of perfection shattered in minutes. Jessica tried to mask her panic, but it was too late. Her carefully curated composure cracked, her shoulders tensing, her hands fluttering nervously as she attempted to organize her own staff. The look in her eyes spoke volumes. She had never imagined losing control, never imagined the perfect image she had built unraveling before her. I allowed myself a quiet smile. The release of tension in my chest was immediate, profound. Every insult, every sneer she had directed at me, every moment I had swallowed my pride, was vindicated in the delicate chaos around her. This was not about cruelty. This was about justice. This was about reclaiming what she had tried to take from me: respect, recognition, and a voice that could no longer be ignored. Her fiancé, Lucas, appeared confused, trying to reassure her. His words were kind, oblivious to the subtle dynamics that had led to this moment. I watched Jessica falter, realizing that even her allies could not rescue the illusion she had so meticulously constructed. I saw the tension in her jaw, the forced steadiness in her posture, and it felt like a weight I had carried for months lifting off my shoulders. I lingered at the edge of the crowd, invisible but entirely present, taking in every sound, the whispers of guests, the flurry of activity among the staff, the strained attempts at composure from the bride herself. Each detail, each reaction, was a note in a symphony of justice that had been perfectly orchestrated without her ever suspecting a thing. I could feel a calm flood over me, a release I had never experienced before. Relief, triumph, validation. It was not just about disrupting a wedding. It was about demonstrating that arrogance and cruelty have consequences. It was about asserting that being overlooked and dismissed does not make one powerless. Jessica finally sank into a chair briefly, trying to collect herself, eyes darting to everyone around her, realizing that the narrative she had controlled for months was gone. She had been the architect of her own humiliation, and there was nothing left to salvage. I turned and walked away slowly, letting the scene play out behind me. I did not gloat. I did not shout. I simply moved through the quiet satisfaction of knowing that balance had been restored. The storm had passed, and I had weathered it with precision. Every breath felt lighter. Every movement felt freer. Every moment of disrespect she had ever shown me was finally met with the appropriate consequence. And in that moment, I understood something essential. Revenge is sweetest when it is executed not out of rage, but with clarity, patience, and purpose. Jessica would never forget this day. I would never forget the release it gave me. The lesson had been delivered, and justice had quietly, impeccably taken its course. I felt whole again, strong again, respected again. The days after the wedding were quiet, almost surreal. Jessica retreated into herself. The bravado that had defined her for years finally stripped away by the consequences of her own actions. I noticed the way she avoided eye contact, the subtle tension in her posture, the way she no longer spoke with the sharpness that had once cut me deeply. It was not joy or gloating that filled me, but a calm certainty. Justice had been delivered, and it had been earned. I reflected on the months leading up to this moment, on the weight of being dismissed, undermined, and disrespected. I realized that patience, planning, and precision had been my greatest allies. Revenge is not about anger alone. It is about timing, clarity, and letting the natural consequences unfold with deliberate intention. I felt a quiet pride in the restraint I had exercised, in the way I had channeled years of frustration into a measured, calculated outcome. Claire noticed the difference in me immediately. I was lighter, steadier, more present. We spent evenings discussing the small victories, the lessons learned, and the importance of maintaining boundaries. I understood now that love does not require blind tolerance. Respect must be mutual, and when it is absent, it is not weakness to enforce it, it is strength. I thought about Jessica, about how the experience had reshaped her. I did not feel the need to explain, to apologize, or to justify. The lesson had been delivered through experience, and experience is often the most powerful teacher. I could see the subtle humility beginning to form in her, the realization that the world does not bend for arrogance, and that people who give without recognition are not to be taken for granted. Life settled into a rhythm again, but with a different perspective. I valued my time and my energy more. I understood that setting boundaries and standing firm is not only necessary but liberating. I had taken control of a situation that had threatened to diminish me, and in doing so, I discovered a part of myself I had long ignored: quiet, patient, unstoppable resolve. I thought about how many people suffer in silence, overlooked, belittled, and underestimated. My story became a reminder that empowerment does not require confrontation, and that justice does not need violence. Sometimes, the simplest, most elegant solutions are the most devastating. Karma does not need to be forced, it only needs to be guided. As I look back now, I see a clear line from every insult, every dismissal, to the moment of vindication. It was a journey that demanded patience, strategy, and courage. It was a journey that taught me that respect is earned, that boundaries are essential, and that standing firm does not require cruelty, only clarity. I moved forward with a sense of renewal. My relationship with Claire grew stronger, grounded in shared understanding and mutual respect. I approached every challenge with a calm precision, knowing that control is not about dominating others, but about mastering oneself, and in that mastery, I found freedom. Every time I think about that day, a quiet satisfaction fills me. Not because I humiliated Jessica, but because I honored myself, my values, and my patience. I demonstrated that injustice, no matter how personal, can be addressed with intelligence, strategy, and dignity. That is a lesson I will carry for the rest of my life. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button, share your own most satisfying revenge story in the comments, and subscribe for more gripping tales of justice, strategy, and emotional triumph. Remember, standing up for yourself does not require anger, it requires clarity, patience, and purpose.